Most people think startups come after university, but for our guest today, they start right inside the classroom. This is School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global startup world for over 12 years. Through our partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship. And this series, it's all about the professors and leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, and today I'm talking to Dr. Simon, a lecturer at Murdoch Business School in Perth. He teaches leadership and entrepreneurship and helps students turn ideas into real business. Dr. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me.
Pleasure. So, Simon, let's start with your story. How did you end up in academia, and what pulled you towards entrepreneurship and working with students?
Okay, thank you very, very much. Okay, so a little bit of background about me. So I am originally from the UK, and I studied politics. I studied language in the UK for my undergraduate degree, and from there I had a wanderlust. So I wanted to see the world, and as a consequence, I had the great opportunity and the privilege to live and work in a number of different places. But it was my time working in Indonesia where I started a school where I really got the bug for business and entrepreneurship. So it was when I set up a school that I suddenly realized that there's a lot to really take in. There's a lot to really learn when managing an organization. And it was that challenge that led me down the path towards taking an MBA and then doing a PhD in Australia. So I suppose it was a kind of a realization of my own shortcomings that kind of led me down this path. And I've got to say, I've enjoyed the opportunity.
Amazing. And right now, what's something you're working on that really excites you?
Right. Okay. So what's basically a bit of context. So I work at the Murdoch Business School. So that's part of Murdoch University. We are located in Western Australia, in the metropolitan area of Perth. And for those viewers who perhaps may not necessarily know too much about Australia, Perth is located in the bottom left-hand corner of the country, so in the southwest. And the state that we serve and the students that we serve, it's a very diverse state, but it's, I guess you could say, a lot of the economic activity is concentrated in the Perth metropolitan area. So all of this context, what does it mean? Well, in terms of the projects I'm working on, I'm looking to develop entrepreneurial opportunities for people living in the state in more remote communities. We're working to see what we can do to empower and support aspiring entrepreneurs for basically people not necessarily living in the Perth metropolitan area. So we're working in that regard and developing educational opportunities for all Western Australians, not just those living in the Perth area.
That's awesome. Love hearing what's happening behind the scenes. A quick pause before we go deeper. This is for our viewers. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn YouTube channel. We've got more conversations like this coming up with amazing guests, and you won't want to miss them. So back to it. You have studied how small groups create together, right? So
Sure.
now you coach students doing that every day.
Mm-hmm.
What's something young startup teams often get wrong when it comes to leadership or working together?
Well, I think experience has kind of taught me that there's no single set of rules that can apply to everyone. In essence, entrepreneurship, leadership, many kind of professional endeavors, really we can find ourselves facing a whole range of different challenges along the way. So I think it would be fair to say that there is no secret formula. But I think I probably would go so far as to say that if we want to overcome challenges and if we want to prevail, be that in a professional capacity or in a personal capacity, I think our ability to apply ourselves and apply ourselves consistently is really key. Certainly in the field of entrepreneurship, hard work, focus, discipline. I don't think you can go too far wrong if you keep that in mind.
Amazing. And when you mix leadership with creativity, things might get messy as well. So how do you help students keep both without losing the plot?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I'm tempted to talk for a great deal of time. But in essence, what I really worked on and what I've researched is the issue of shared leadership, and really what we're looking at in this capacity is the ability to recognize when your skills and your capabilities are particularly relevant in a certain circumstance, but also recognizing situations where perhaps you don't have all the answers, and then under those circumstances we might pass on that responsibility to somebody else on the team. So I'm really interested in this idea of distributed leadership, where as a group of professionals, we can each take a role in making leadership decisions, and by working together, we can hopefully achieve more than the sum of our parts. So I looked at this in the context of network analysis. It's something that I'm quite interested in. What we found was that when teams are able to share responsibilities, particularly leadership responsibilities, the creative output and the performance of the team can often be enhanced. Doesn't work under all circumstances, and sometimes it's really important to have a single leader, but I think certainly when we're dealing with creative context, creative challenges, it can make a massive difference. So yeah, it's I think a really interesting area, and something I'm continuing to look into.
Interesting. So let's zoom out a bit. What do you think are the biggest challenges for student founders, especially in Australia right now?
Right. Well, I think the big challenges that I think a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs face here in Australia are kind of, well, I mean, I think it's always going to be the case that one's context is going to shape the nature of the challenges that we face. So yeah, I think that if you happen to live in a remote community, you're going to be facing a very different set of challenges as compared to whether you happen to be kind of working in a part of the world where there's a lot of support, there's a lot of talent that might be available. So I think to kind of talk about Australia as a whole, it can be kind of difficult. It's difficult to generalize. I think in terms of a Western Australian context, aspiring entrepreneurs here, it's kind of interesting. I think we have to kind of understand a little bit about the economy here to first kind of tackle that. So Western Australia, it's an area of land that covers about 2.5 million square kilometers. It's a vast area of land, yet we have a relatively small population, and much of that population is concentrated in the Perth metropolitan area, or at least in the southwest. If you happen to be living in this part of the state, then your access to resources, education, infrastructure, all of these things can be really quite impressive. I think it's a very prosperous state, and we have, if we're living in this metropolitan community, we have access to some incredible resources. If you happen to be living in more remote communities, then you've got a very, very different picture. And under those circumstances, I think that business has a role in helping to alleviate some of the pressures, but I would also maybe say that the government has a really important role to play. So I think with that in mind, what kind of characterizes, broadly speaking, the entrepreneurial environment for aspiring entrepreneurs in WA? Well, a big challenge is that we're kind of prosperous, and that might seem like a strange kind of problem, but perhaps allow me to explain. So with a lot of my students, if I might ask, okay, well, are you planning to go and start your own business upon graduation? Many people often, say, definitely, but a great many students also think in terms of pursuing a career right after university. And I think obviously this is a laudable course, a laudable journey to take. This is great because you're going to develop professional skills and professional capabilities. But I think there's also, it's also the case that if you're in a comfortable career and if you're getting a good salary, I think it's natural to kind of question whether entrepreneurship is right for us, because entrepreneurship involves risk-taking. Entrepreneurship can be hugely successful, but there's no guarantee. So I think that because of the prosperity that I think a lot of people enjoy in Western Australia, and I'm not saying this is true for everyone, what often happens is that people just don't take the risk. And I think that maybe that can be a real challenge for many people, I suppose. But I guess, it's maybe a nice challenge to have.
Amazing.
I think another thing is that I think a great kind of element to the entrepreneurial environment here is that we're a very diverse community in Western Australia. We've got a population that is, I guess you could say, a large proportion of our population was born overseas, and really our population is very diverse. So there are a lot of languages spoken here, a lot of different cultures that intermingle, work together. We're a relatively, I think, a tolerant society, and I think in some respects, because we've got such great infrastructure, we've got a lot of educational facilities, we're on a time zone that is connected to some of the largest markets in the world. Because we're so diverse, I think, there are so many strong positives for anyone looking to start their own business here in Western Australia. However, I keep going back to that earlier point. When things are comfortable, then maybe you don't see quite so many people step out of their comfort zone. And I think that maybe that's one of the big issues as far as entrepreneurship is concerned here. Sorry if that answer went on very long.
No, not at all. I had a follow-up question with respect to diversity, right?
Yeah.
So, we all know Australia is super diverse, especially in universities, right? So how do you see that showing up in student ventures? And are we doing enough to support founders from all backgrounds?
Look, that's a really interesting question. And indeed, that's something that it's an area of research that I'm currently working on with my colleagues. So looking into recent migrants and the challenges that they face when starting a venture. So I guess going back to the earlier point, that there is no one single formula, one single approach. Some of the early data that we're collecting suggests that different communities face different challenges, and maybe part of the reason might be linguistic, but some of the other challenges include maybe networks. And indeed, Perth, it's not a particularly large city in relation to or compared to maybe cities in other parts of Australia. But I think one of the challenges that many people encounter when settling in Perth is really building that network, building a series of connections with trusted partners. So if you look at migrant communities that have been long established in Western Australia, there tends to be a much stronger set of connections that exist. And as a consequence, we see the opportunities for migrants coming from that cultural group tend to have I'm not going to say an easier time, but it's easier to really establish an understanding of the entrepreneurial landscape. By contrast, if we're dealing with a community that perhaps doesn't have a long-standing historical association with Western Australia, that process can take a little bit longer. However, I think it's fair to say that in terms of tolerance, and obviously people are going to have different experiences, but I think Western Australia tends to be quite open-minded and quite accepting of people from right around the world. And look, obviously I'm not from Western Australia myself originally, and you may very well argue that perhaps because of my British background, that might kind of give me a bit of a free pass. I don't know, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of the efforts taken by governments to assimilate and support new migrants have been pretty successful.
Amazing. So you recently spoke about adding the SDGs into how we teach entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So what does that actually look like in your classroom? So how do you help students think about building sustainable businesses, not just the ones that make money?
Okay, look, I really appreciate that question because I think it's really important. I think that when we think in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation, often the focus that perhaps we might have is profitability. And I don't want to detract from the importance of that. I think it's really super critical, not least for employees, the families of entrepreneurs, customers. I think, we need to be able to turn a profit, and no one here at our university is denying the value of that. But I think we also kind of recognize that entrepreneurship can be a really positive force for social and environmental good as well. And though we're not here to stand in anyone's way as far as the business aspirations our graduates have, we also want to try to ensure that along the way, during the learning journey, graduates can gain an insight into some really important issues concerning sustainability. And I think from our point of view, this is something that corresponds with our university strategy, but it's not really that kind of pushed us in this direction. We've kind of worked in this direction because we have to think about sustainability on multiple levels, not just financial. So a little bit about the major that we've developed. So in the wake of the COVID crisis, my colleagues and I developed an entrepreneurship and innovation major that is made up of 8 study units that build to a capstone unit in which students present to potential investors on their projects, their solutions, their products, their services. And of course, all being good, all being well, they get funding as a consequence of that. But along the way, we've tried to make sure that at each step, we can kind of incorporate sustainability principles into each of these study modules and study units. So let me perhaps try and give you an explanation or an example. So the first step in this study journey is a study experience called the innovator's mindset. And really, in essence, this is a design and development unit. We believe that from an entrepreneurial perspective, if we don't have a product or if we don't have a service, then all else is really peripheral. It's all pretty much unimportant there. We need to have something new, innovative, interesting to offer. And this doesn't mean that we can't change this along the way, but we try to ensure that if you're studying design or if you're exploring the development of a product, let's perhaps incorporate a sustainability element to this so that, in essence, not only are we learning about the product or service, not only are we learning about our customers and our users, but we're also thinking about the context in which this product or this service is actually being made, is being used, can be recycled or repurposed, and so on. So it's very much a learning process in which we look just beyond just the customer and the solution. We have to think in that context, and we want to try and bring in sustainability principles into that. So we want to try and ensure that this experience is holistic. It's not simply just a binary kind of formula. And this is something that we do throughout the program. So we look at project management, we look at entrepreneurial finance, we look at entrepreneurial strategy, and a range of different units. And at each stage, we try to incorporate sustainability or a different element of sustainability into that process, so that we hope and we help encourage students or graduates to have a more holistic understanding of issues. I hope that helps.
Amazing. I think this bit is highlighting of this show as well. So coming back to the university itself, right? You have worked a lot on partnerships between businesses and universities, right? So what's working well right now, and what's still a bit clunky?
Okay, so I think that partnerships, that's a really interesting issue, simply because different partners typically want different things. So here at the university, we have partnerships that relate to research. We have partnerships that relate to training and development. We have partnerships relating to the support of new entrepreneurial ventures. And we tend to kind of find that everything requires relationship building, I suppose. It requires patience, it requires dialogue, and ultimately all of this takes time. So because we are an endeavor to be profoundly accountable, and we try to ensure that we don't embark on projects that could conceivably lead to unforeseen circumstances and negative outcomes for different members of the community. And because our resources are relatively limited, we try not to just launch into projects if somebody comes and says, hey, this is a great idea, what if we do this, and what if we do that? And I think that can sometimes kind of result in a very, I suppose you could argue, a clash of cultures. That in an entrepreneurial setting, we often see opportunities, and we often want to kind of seize those opportunities. We don't want to sit around and wait for things to happen and see those opportunities pass us by. Universities, by contrast, I think, at least in Western Australia, we tend to be a little bit more slow. You know, I think it's fair to say we need to get a lot of people on side to get approval for certain initiatives, and I think that this can result in frustrations for different potential stakeholders. But ultimately, we're trying to ensure that we get things right, and we're trying to ensure that we're not disadvantaging members of the community that perhaps if we'd said yes to originally could very well be disadvantaged. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, interesting. Besides that, what you have told, if you could rebuild how universities support student founders from the ground up, what's the first thing you would like to change?
So if I had a blank canvas and I was teaching entrepreneurship and I wanted to, okay, well, look, I think in some respects that's something that we actually had the opportunity to do. So in the wake of the COVID pandemic, this is really where both I and my colleagues had this wonderful opportunity to develop the entrepreneurship major from the ground up. And we kind of began this journey by asking the question, or try to put ourselves in the shoes of students. And we asked the question, if I was a student, what would I want to know? What would I want to kind of develop? And we tried to kind of take ourselves out of the equation. So it's not just a matter of what are our skills, how do I fit this into the model? It was more a question of, if I was a student, what would I need? What would I want? What would be valuable? And this led us down some kind of unusual paths. So design, for example, I think that was an area that we don't have strong grounding in, but we did get support and we were able to bring some really impressive people on board. And that was something that I think our students really appreciated and has been really helpful for a lot of our graduates. Another area might be, for example, law. So I think if I had a magic wand and if I could do it all again, what I would do is, again, stick with that same formula of develop a program based around the needs of entrepreneurs, but I would expand things because we are given parameters. And I think that's fair to say with anyone who's developing anything. So designers throughout the world have to work around parameters. I would love to expand our offerings. I would love to pour more resources into what we do. I think our team, we really love what we do and it's really fulfilling, but we're never satisfied. We're always looking to see what we can do to improve, to expand, take things out, add things. And yeah, it would be lovely if we had more time. Maybe that's the answer. If I had my wish, I'd have more time so that we could offer more experiences.
Interesting. So, looking ahead, how do you see academia's role changing in the startup and innovation space? Are we talking professors turning into VCs or something completely different?
I think that in a sense, you could maybe find yourself kind of encountering a potential, what's the word I'm looking for? I think if we had something like this, there's the potential for a conflict of interest there. I rather think that we need to see ourselves as impartial professionals in this capacity. I can certainly see merit to that approach, but I think I see our role as being a very critical eye, but an encouraging support mechanism for students. I know that the temptation for students aspiring to be entrepreneurs, the academia's role is often seen to be as supportive as possible. I think that at times we need to learn, or we need to recognize when we need to stand aside and let people actually flourish and do things themselves. Again, I don't think that academia's role is to kind of provide answers to all the questions and all the challenges that entrepreneurs face. But I do think we should be critical. We need to be on hand to be able to call out errors when we see them. I think we have a role in terms of connecting aspiring entrepreneurs to potential partners and potential support mechanisms. I think we have a role in research, and I think we have a role in terms of encouragement, because ultimately as far as I can see, many of my students, you don't come up with the great idea like that. It takes time. It involves trial and error. It involves a lot of pain, a lot of setbacks, but you learn from this process, and over time you turn what is the kernel of a good idea into something that's tangible. And so as an academic, I have to be there to support. And as an academic, I have to be there to provide connections, maybe. So I don't know if that's a single answer, but it's a hard one to really pin down.
True, very true. So a couple of quick ones for students or anyone just starting. What's your best advice in one sentence for getting started and not getting stuck? Yeah, I know it is difficult to say in one sentence.
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
have told many things
yeah,
during
yeah.
this interview.
I think that it's a combination of working hard and taking the risk. You work hard in order to understand the challenge that you're facing, but ultimately you need to be willing and able to go and take the risk and keep at it. I think if you simply take a risk and you don't work hard, that's a recipe for disaster. And if you work hard and don't take any risks, then you're not going to start your own business. So I'd say it's a combination of those. It's more than that, but you're asking me for a question. So work hard and take a risk. You've got to be willing.
Interesting. And one book you would like to suggest for those students who are starting the entrepreneurship?
If you're starting your own business and if you're starting your own venture, you need to have some thick skin. You're going to be facing setbacks along the way. People are going to tell you that your idea isn't going to work. People are going to tell you that it's not worth it. People are going to say, why don't you do this? It can be a lonely road, and it can be a disheartening road to follow. And so you got to have thick skin. You got to be determined. But on the other hand, we also have to be open-minded. So sometimes that advice is not bad. We've got to learn from it. But ultimately, if you're going down this path, it can be incredibly rewarding, but you need to have some very thick skin.
Interesting. And the last one, if someone wants to follow your work, your program, or reach out to you, where's the best place?
Okay, so just take a look at the Murdoch Business School website. That's pretty much where I live, and you can maybe follow me there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon. That was such a grounded and insightful conversation. We talked about leadership, sustainability, creativity, and how real startups begin inside classrooms. Huge thanks to Dr. Simon for being part of this episode and sharing his journey with us. If you have liked this, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn YouTube channel. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. See you in the next one.